So, in the 1980s, we basically started slathering ourselves in this brand new chemical shield, right, to stop skin cancer.
Right, yeah.
I mean, we did exactly what we were told. We tossed out the baby oil, we bought the brightly colored squeeze bottles, and we made high SPF sunscreen just like a non-negotiable part of going outside.
Yeah, total cultural shift.
Exactly. So why, 40 years later, have skin cancer diagnosis rates steadily and stubbornly exploded?
Well, it is the ultimate medical paradox. I mean, we adopted this mass market defense mechanism across the entire population, and the specific threat we were trying to neutralize, it only seemed to gain momentum.
It's wild. It really makes you question everything you pack in your beach bag. Like, how is it that our primary weapon against skin cancer might actually be operating in parallel with its rise?
Yeah, it's a huge question.
And that is exactly the mission for this deep dive. Today, we're drawing from a really fascinating transcript featuring health and wellness expert Gary Brecka, along with some deeply revealing clinical studies.
This is really eye-opening stuff in there.
Totally. We're going to unpack the actual mechanics of UV radiation down to the cellular level. We're going to dissect exactly what is inside those sunscreen tubes we've been, unconditionally trusting. And we're exploring some cutting-edge, completely natural alternatives that science is finally catching up to.
And we really need to anchor this conversation in reality for you right now, because the stakes here are just astronomical.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about the inconvenience of peeling shoulders after a weekend at the lake, According to the data in our sources, over 1 in 5 Americans will develop some form of skin cancer in their lifetime.
Wow.
Yeah. To put that completely in perspective, more people are diagnosed with skin cancer annually in the United States than all other cancers combined.
See, I really want you to let that sink in. Think about your extended family, your friend group, the people you work with. More than breast cancer, lung cancer, prostate cancer, like all of them combined.
It's staggering.
1 in 5 Americans. That means if you are sitting at a dinner table with a family of 5, statistically, this directly impacts one of you. It's this massive, silent epidemic that we've kind of just culturally normalized.
We really have.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the actual biology, because we throw the word burn around very casually, right?
Oh, constantly.
We joke about falling asleep by the pool and looking like a lobster, but what is actually happening under the microscope when the sun hits your skin?
Well, the word burn is honestly a massive disservice to what is fundamentally occurring.
Really?
Yeah. It implies a thermal event, like touching a hot pan or spilling boiling water.
Yeah.
But a sunburn is actually a radiation injury.
A radiation injury.
Exactly. Ultraviolet rays from the sun or from artificial sources like canning beds, they're emitting these microscopic packets of energy called photons. And when these UV photons penetrate your skin, they physically crash into the DNA housed inside the nucleus of your skin cells.
Okay, so we aren't like cooking our skin. We are literally bombarding our cellular software with radiation.
That is a much more accurate framework, yeah.
Huh.
The UV radiation strikes the DNA strands and physically breaks the nucleotide bonds. It scrambles the blueprint.
Wow.
Now, normally, your body is incredibly smart. You have a built-in mechanism called apoptosis, which is essentially programmed cell death.
Right.
When a cell realizes its DNA is corrupted beyond repair, it's supposed to hit the self-destruct button so it doesn't replicate.
Like a factory tossing a defective car part into the incinerator before it gets put on an actual vehicle.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
But here's the problem with intense or chronic UV exposure. The sheer volume of damage overwhelms that quality control system.
So the system just crashes.
The defenses fail, yeah. A cell with mutated DNA survives, it doesn't self-destruct, and it begins to divide. It creates a copy of itself and then another copy and another.
And that's it.
Right? That uncontrolled runaway replication of corrupted cells is exactly what cancer is.
And the source material points out that not all of these rogue mutated cells behave the same way once they start replicating.
No, they don't.
There are 3 main profiles of skin cancer we need to talk about. I know the clinical terms can sound like alphabet soup, but understanding how they behave in your body is incredibly important. So let's look at the most common one first. Basal cell carcinoma.
Right, so basal cell carcinoma originates in the basal cells, which are right at the bottom of the outermost layer of your skin.
Okay.
If you're looking at your own body, our source notes that this often appears as a pearly or waxy bump. It might even look like a small translucent pimple that just doesn't go away. And it predominantly shows up on the real estate that gets the most sun, your face, the tops of your ears, your neck, your shoulders.
I look at that description, a pearly, waxy bump, And I can easily see why someone would just brush it off. I mean, it sounds totally harmless. It doesn't look like a horror movie.
Which is exactly why people let it sit there for years. The defining behavioral trait of basal cell carcinoma is that it's highly localized.
Okay.
It very rarely metastasizes. It's not likely to enter your bloodstream and travel to your liver or your brain.
Well, that's good at least.
It is, but that doesn't mean it's harmless. If you leave it alone, it grows downward. It acts like a slow-moving sinkhole, aggressively invading and destroying the surrounding tissue, the muscle, and eventually even the bone underneath it.
Ugh, wow. You know, I was trying to map this out in my head while reading the notes, and it feels exactly like having termites in your house.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right, because termites aren't going to suddenly fly across the neighborhood and infest your neighbor's roof. They stay exactly where they are. But if you ignore them because they seem contained, they will just sit there for years, silently eating through the floorboards, then the foundational joists, until that specific room completely collapses. Basal cell is like the termite of skin cancer.
It's a really apt visualization. It stays put, but it commands a massive toll on its immediate environment. Now, moving one step up the ladder of severity, we have squamous cell carcinoma.
And this one presents totally differently.
Very differently.
You're not looking for a pearly bump. The source says to watch out for a red, scaly patch, or a sore that just will not heal. It's that scab on your arm you thought you got from scratching a bug bite, but 3 months later, it's still crusty and bleeding.
Yeah. The squamous cells are closer to the surface than basal cells, but when they mutate, they are behaviorally much more aggressive.
Okay.
This type of cancer has mobility. It has a significantly higher likelihood of spreading to your lymph nodes or other parts of your body if you don't intervene.
So, if basal cell is termites, squamous cell is more like a trail of ants in your kitchen.
Right.
They start on the counter, but if you don't wipe them out, they're going to find their way into the pantry and then the living room. They travel. But, and the source is very clear about this, if you catch the ants while they are still just on the kitchen counter, you can call an exterminator and handle it. Squamous cell is highly treatable if caught early.
It responds very well to early surgical intervention, yes. But that brings us to the third category, the one that completely changes the risk profile. Melanoma.
The deadliest.
Yeah.
And there is a staggering statistical asymmetry here from our source that absolutely stopped me in my tracks.
It's shocking.
Melanoma accounts for roughly 1% of all skin cancer cases. Just 1%. But it causes the vast majority of all skin cancer deaths.
Yeah, it is the ultimate low probability, high consequence threat.
Oh.
Melanomas originate in the melanocytes, which are the cells that actually produce your skin's pigment.
Okay.
Visually, it usually presents as a new dark mole or a sudden erratic change in a mole you've had your whole life. You're looking for asymmetrical shapes, jagged borders, or changes in color.
Right, so it's not a termite and it's not an ant. Melanoma is a fast-moving fire. A spark hits the curtains, and before you even realize what's happening, the whole room is engulfed.
Exactly.
It actively seeks to spread to major organs like the lungs and the brain, and it does so quickly. But I have to admit, reading this, I found myself getting a little defensive.
Oh.
Well, since melanoma usually appears as a changing mole, and almost every single human being has moles, how do we navigate this without becoming totally paranoid? I mean, every time I look at my forearm in the shower, am I supposed to panic that a freckle looks slightly different?
Yeah, I mean, that anxiety is super common, but panic is the exact opposite of what the medical community wants. The goal is routine management.
Okay.
We have to anchor this in a profoundly hopeful piece of data from the source. When caught early, before it is spread to the lymph nodes, melanoma has a 99% survival rate.
99%. That's almost complete eradication.
It is an incredibly high success rate for a disease that is otherwise fatal. But the catch is that the survival rate drops right off a statistical cliff the moment it enters the lymphatic system.
Wow.
So the vigilance we're talking about isn't about staring at your arm in a panic every morning. It's about taking a clinical inventory of your own body once a month. It's about knowing your own geography, combined with an annual professional screening by a dermatologist who has a trained eye and a magnifying dermatoscope.
Yeah, you just have to know your baseline. To defeat the enemy, you have to understand its weapons. We know what the cellular damage looks like now, the basal, the squamous, the melanoma. But let's look at the actual missiles being fired at us from 93 million miles away.
Let's do it.
The source breaks down the sun's emissions into two distinct categories that every single person listening has seen on the side of a plastic bottle at the drugstore, but probably never fully grasped: UVA and UVB.
What's fascinating here is how these two distinct wavelengths of light wage war on your biology
Yeah.
using completely different tactics.
Right.
They have different physical properties, they target different layers of tissue, and they yield entirely different long-term consequences.
Right.
Let's dissect UVA first. I always find it helpful to associate the A with aging.
UVA, the ager.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
UVA rays possess a longer physical wavelength. Think of it like a long, rolling ocean wave.
Okay.
Because the wavelength is long, it doesn't crash on the shore. It penetrates deeply into the skin, bypassing the surface epidermis entirely and sinking right into the thick, deeper layer called the dermis.
And the dermis is where all the structural integrity of our skin lives, right?
Yes, that's where your collagen and elastin reside.
Mm.
When UVA rays hit the dermis, they cause severe oxidative stress. They literally break down collagen fibers and cause elastin to cross-link and stiffen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is the primary driver of premature aging, deep wrinkling, and the loss of skin elasticity. But more insidiously, they also cause indirect, deep tissue DNA damage.
And here is a crucial, incredibly surprising fact for you listening right now. UVA rays do not care about your windows, and they do not care about the weather.
Oh.
The source makes this explicitly clear. Glass blocks UVB, but UVA rays pass right through it with almost zero resistance. Think about your daily commute. If you are sitting in traffic with the sun beating through the driver's side window, your left arm and the left side of your face are absorbing deep tissue UVA radiation.
Exactly right.
If you work in an office right next to a giant, beautiful, sunny window, you are exposed. If you go for a walk on a completely overcast, gloomy Tuesday in November, the UVA rays are punching right through those clouds. It is a constant, invisible threat.
It really is. We have been culturally conditioned to associate danger with the sensation of heat,
Yeah.
If we don't feel the sun burning us or if we aren't outside in a swimsuit, we just assume we're shielded. But UVA is silent, it is cold, and it is pervasive. And speaking of pervasive, the source brings up a staggering statistic regarding concentrated voluntary UVA exposure.
Huh.
Tanning beds.
Oh, this genuinely shocked me.
Tanning beds are engineered to primarily emit UVA radiation. The goal is to stimulate your melanocytes to produce melanin, giving you that dark pigment, without triggering the immediate painful surface burn that UVB causes.
Makes sense, functionally.
But the biological cost is horrific. The data shows that frequent use of tanning beds increases your risk of developing melanoma by 75% before the age of 35.
75%. And before the age of 35, when we think of cancer, we generally associate it with the later decades of life, like a result of cellular decay over a long time.
Usually, yes.
But this is a massive, aggressive spike in risk for young adults, driven entirely by concentrated cosmetic UVA exposure. So that is the ager. Let's flip the coin and look at UVB.
Right. So if UVA is the ager, UVB is the burner. B for burn.
Got it.
UVB rays have a much shorter, more energetic wavelength.
Yeah.
They act like choppy, rapid waves that crash directly onto the shore. They'll penetrate deeply. They hit the superficial layers of your skin, the epidermis, and they just stop there.
But when they crash on that surface layer, they hit with intense energy. These are the rays directly responsible for the erythema, the redness, the swelling, the painful peeling sunburn.
Exactly. That immediate thermal and inflammatory response is your body screaming that is under attack.
Yeah.
While UVB rays stay on the surface, they are incredibly destructive to the DNA in those superficial skin cells. They cause direct physical breaks in the DNA strains, leading directly to the mutations that form basal and squamous cell carcinomas.
Okay.
Now, unlike UVA, which is an omnipresent threat from sunup to sundown all year round, UVB has a very specific operational window. It's significantly stronger during the summer months, and it peaks between 10:00 and 4:00 p.m.
So timing is everything with the burner rays. You can be outside at 8:00 a.m. and barely register UVB, but at noon, you're cooking within 20 minutes.
Exactly.
But here is the overarching philosophy the source wants to imprint on you. Skin cancer is almost never the result of one catastrophic mistake. You don't fall asleep on a lounge chair for 6 hours once during spring break in college and wake up a decade later with a melanoma diagnosis.
Right.
It doesn't work like that. It is a cumulative ledger.
The body keeps the score. Every single exposure is a deposit into a highly destructive savings account.
And the Skin Cancer Foundation has research that quantifies exactly what that ledger looks like. Having just 5 or more sunburns in your entire lifetime mathematically doubles your risk of developing melanoma.
Just 5.
Yeah.
If you think about a lifespan of 70 or 80 years, experiencing a sunburn 5 times is incredibly, almost unavoidably common for the average person.
Oh, totally.
Yet that small number of acute inflammatory events is enough to double the risk of the most lethal form of skin cancer. It really highlights how profoundly sensitive our cellular architecture is to short-wavelength radiation.
Absolutely. So, armed with all of this knowledge, knowing that UV radiation mutates our DNA, understanding the difference between the deep, invisible UVA and the surface scorching UVB, you look at human history and you see a very logical response.
Right.
We identified the threat and we asked chemistry to build us a shield. We invented mass-market sunscreen. Which brings us right back to the central paradox of this deep dive.
The timeline is the smoking gun here. The 1980s marked a monumental shift in public health. Sunscreen went from being a niche product used by surfers and mountaineers to a daily mass-marketed necessity.
Yeah, everybody had it.
Dermatologists pushed it, public health campaigns pushed it, parents slathered it on their kids. Yet since that mass adoption, the incidence rates of skin cancer haven't plummeted. They've steadily, relentlessly increased.
So how do we explain this? Did the sunscreen cause the cancer? Did it just fail to stop it?
It's complicated.
Our source provides a few deeply compelling theories to explain the paradox, breaking them down into behavioral psychology and hidden biology. Let's look at the behavioral side first, which the source calls the Superman effect.
The Superman effect is a fascinating study in behavioral economics and risk compensation.
Okay.
When a person meticulously applies a thick layer of high SPF sunscreen, they experience a psychological shift. They develop a false sense of invincibility. They feel like Superman tying on his cape.
Right.
Because the sunscreen effectively blocks the UVB rays, the rays that cause the immediate painful burn, their body's natural early warning alarm system is completely silenced.
Right. Think about your last beach vacation. If you went out to the beach with bare skin, the sheer pain of the sun beating down on you would force you to seek shade under an umbrella or go inside after maybe 40 minutes. Your biology forces you to retreat.
Exactly.
But you put on SPF 50, you don't feel the burn, and suddenly you're lying in direct sunlight for 5 hours reading a book.
Precisely. This absolute over-reliance on sunscreen as a solitary method of protection leads people to dramatically, exponentially increase their total duration of sun exposure.
Wow.
And here is the fatal flaw.
Yeah.
Historically, many of these sunscreens were incredibly effective at blocking UVB, the burn, but they offered terrible protection against UVA, the agar. But you sit on the beach for 6 hours, completely unburned, feeling totally safe, while soaking up massive, unprecedented amounts of deep penetrating, DNA-mutating UVA radiation.
You basically turned off the smoke detector so you didn't realize the house was filling up with carbon monoxide.
That's exactly it.
That makes perfect behavioral sense. Now, let's pivot to the biological theory, which is highly controversial but heavily discussed in the functional medicine space. The vitamin D dilemma.
Right. This requires looking at the unintended consequences of chemical intervention. Sunscreens, especially the high SPF chemical ones, are engineered to aggressively intercept UVB rays. However, UVB radiation is the exact specific trigger our bodies require to synthesize vitamin D in the skin.
The sun hits the skin, interacts with cholesterol, and boom, we make cholecalciferol, which becomes vitamin D.
Exactly. But by culturally mandating the constant blocking of UVB, we have inadvertently engineered a population-level epidemic of vitamin D deficiency.
Wow.
And calling it a vitamin really downplays its importance. Vitamin D functions as a systemic hormone. It's a critical regulator of immune function, bone density, and overall cellular health. Some researchers argue that by chronically lowering our systemic vitamin D levels in the name of protecting our skin, we might be crippling our body's overarching natural immune defenses. By trying to prevent local mutations on the skin, we might be making the entire biological system more vulnerable.
It is the ultimate double-edged sword. You fix one problem and create a systemic vulnerability elsewhere. But I want to look at the actual clinical data on sunscreen efficacy, because this was the part of the transcript that forced me to reevaluate everything I thought I knew.
It's pretty shocking.
There is a massive study from the Journal of Clinical Oncology that investigated what regular daily sunscreen use actually achieves in the real world over years of application.
Yeah, the methodology was sound, but the findings were highly specific and radically counterintuitive to what the general public believes.
Okay.
The study concluded that regular, diligent sunscreen use did significantly reduce the risk of developing squamous cell carcinoma.
Okay, the ant trail, the second most common one. That's a point for sunscreen.
It is a definitive point. However, the study also revealed that regular sunscreen use had a notably insignificant impact on the diagnostic rates of basal cell carcinoma and, most alarmingly, melanoma.
Okay, wait. I have to push back on this because the implications are huge. We're told to apply this stuff religiously. We put it on our babies. But if our primary defense mechanism is barely making a mathematical dent against the deadliest form of the disease melanoma, are we basically putting on armor that only protects us against paper cuts?
It's a stark way to frame it, but the epidemiological data suggests that relying on traditional sunscreen as an impenetrable force field is a fundamentally flawed strategy.
Wow.
It's not useless. It demonstrably mitigates squamous cell risk and prevents erythema, but the idea that it is a holistic shield against the true dangers of the sun is a marketing triumph, not a scientific reality.
Which means we cannot afford to just blindly grab whatever brightly colored bottle is on sale at the pharmacy. If the shield has holes in it, we need to take a microscope to the material of the shield. We need to know what we are rubbing into our pores.
We really do.
This brings us to the great divide in the skincare industry. The chemical cocktail versus the physical shield.
Right. There are two completely different mechanisms at play in the sunscreen aisle, utilizing entirely different physics and biology, and understanding this distinction is vital for your long-term health.
Let's get into it.
Let's start with the physical blockers, which are often marketed as mineral sunscreens. The active ingredients here are almost exclusively zinc oxide and titanium dioxide.
Our source, Gary Brecka, is a massive advocate for these physical blockers. And honestly, the mechanism of action is beautifully simple to understand. They literally sit on top of your skin.
Yep.
They are ground up minerals. When you apply them, they don't sink in. They create a physical opaque barrier that bounces the UV photons off your body, exactly like a mirror reflecting a laser beam.
And that surface level mechanism is their greatest biological asset. Because the molecules of zinc and titanium are too large to penetrate the skin's lipid barrier, they remain outside the body. Consequently, the FDA has classified zinc oxide and titanium dioxide as GRACE, generally recognized as safe and effective. They do not enter your bloodstream, they reflect the radiation, and at the end of the day, you wash them down the drain.
Okay, so a mineral mirror on the surface. Now let's contrast that with the vast, overwhelming majority of what you actually find sold in drugstores. Chemical blockers, the absorbers.
Chemical filters operate on a completely divergent physical principle. We're talking about complex synthetic compounds like oxybenzone, avobenzone, octisalate, and octocrylene.
Right.
These chemicals are formulated specifically so they do not sit on the surface. They are designed to absorb deeply into the epidermal layers of your skin.
So they penetrate the fortress walls immediately.
Yes. And once they are embedded in your skin tissue, they act as interceptors. When UV radiation hits the skin, these chemicals absorb the UV photon. A chemical reaction occurs within the molecule that alters its structure. It converts that dangerous UV energy into heat, and then that thermal energy dissipates off your skin.
So instead of a mirror reflecting light, it's a chemical sponge that sucks up the radiation, turns it into heat, and sweats it out. That sounds incredibly high-tech.
It is.
But the problem isn't the heat conversion, right? The problem is the sponge itself, the absorption. Here's where it gets really interesting and a little terrifying.
Yeah.
The source details a bombshell study published in JAMA Dermatology, the Journal of the American Medical Association. This isn't fringe science. This is the gold standard of medical publishing.
The JAMA study fundamentally shifted the global conversation regarding chemical sunscreens. For decades, the assumption was that these chemicals stayed in the skin where they were applied.
Right.
The researchers decided to rigorously test that assumption. They wanted to measure blood plasma levels to see if these chemicals were crossing the skin barrier and entering systemic circulation.
And what did they find?
The findings were deeply alarming. They discovered that active chemical sunscreen ingredients, most notably oxybenzone, are absorbed into the human bloodstream at concentrations that exponentially exceed the FDA's recommended safety threshold.
And I want to make sure you hear this part clearly. This wasn't after a month of heavy daily use on a tropical vacation. The study found these massive systemic spikes after just a single application.
One application.
You put it on once to go out to the community pool, and within hours, complex synthetic compounds are coursing through your veins at levels the FDA flags as warranting toxicology testing.
It's wild.
Mm.
And the downstream biological consequences of having these synthetics in systemic circulation are what researchers are aggressively investigating now. Oxybenzone, in particular, is heavily scrutinized because it acts as an endocrine disruptor.
I hear that term a lot in health circles, but what does an endocrine disruptor actually do in the body?
The endocrine system is your body's master communication network using hormones as messengers. Endocrine disruptors are chemicals that have a molecular shape similar enough to natural hormones like estrogen or testosterone that they can actually fit into your cellular receptors.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so oxybenzone enters your blood, finds a receptor, and binds to it. It can trick the body into thinking there's an excess of estrogen, or it can block testosterone from doing its job.
That sounds really bad.
It is. When you scramble the hormonal signaling, it can lead to a massive cascade of developmental, reproductive, and neurological issues over time.
It's hacking the communication network, and the fallout doesn't stop with human biology, does it?
Not at all.
The environmental impact is undeniable. The source points out that these exact same chemicals, washing off millions of tourist bodies into the ocean, are highly toxic to marine ecosystems. It's gotten so bad that entire regions, like the state of Hawaii and the nation of Palau, have legally banned the sale and use of sunscreens containing oxybenzone.
Right.
And you have to use basic logic here. If a chemical is literally bleaching and killing a massive ancient coral reef system, you have to pause and wonder what it is doing as it filters through your liver.
It requires a macro perspective. If it is toxic to the biome, it is likely toxic to the microbiome.
Yeah.
And the concerns aren't even limited to the intended active ingredients. We also have to look at manufacturing stability.
Ah, yes.
The source highlights the massive ongoing crisis involving the recall of countless aerosol and spray sunscreens from major trusted brands.
Yes, the benzene crisis. This was all over the news.
Right. Independent laboratories were running batch tests on over-the-counter spray sunscreens, and they repeatedly found extreme contamination with a chemical called benzene. Now, to be clear, benzene is not a sunscreen ingredient. Nobody intentionally put it there.
Right.
It is an industrial petrochemical, highly volatile, and a definitively proven human carcinogen.
It is a chemical that causes cancer.
Specifically, long-term or repeated exposure to benzene is strongly linked to leukemia and various other severe blood cancers and disorders.
Yeah.
It was a byproduct of the aerosol manufacturing process. So the absolute tragic irony here is that the very product millions of parents were aggressively spraying onto their children to prevent skin cancer was actively exposing those children to a chemical known to cause blood cancer.
It is genuinely infuriating. You try to do the right thing, you follow the public health guidelines, and you get poisoned by the delivery mechanism. And speaking of tragic irony, let's look at one more chemical ingredient. Octocrylene. If there was an award for the most counterproductive invention in skincare history, this would win it.
Oh, absolutely. Octocrylene is a very common additive used to stabilize other chemical filters in a sunscreen formula, keeping them from degrading on the shelf.
Okay.
But here is the fatal flaw highlighted in the transcript. Octocrylene actually undergoes structural degradation when it is exposed to direct sunlight.
Wait, just so I'm completely clear. A chemical that is specifically manufactured to be worn in the sunlight, whose entire job is to protect you from sunlight, physically falls apart when sunlight actually hits it.
That is the exact mechanism. And it gets worse. When it breaks down under UV radiation, it doesn't just disappear. It produces secondary harmful byproducts.
What kind of byproducts?
These byproducts are known to cause localized skin irritation, severe allergic contact dermatitis, and they can actually generate free radicals that cause further cellular damage. It fundamentally fails in its primary operational environment.
It's like buying an umbrella made out of cotton candy. It looks great in the closet, but the second it starts raining, it dissolves and ruins your clothes.
Exactly.
So if we look at the whole picture, if the chemical cocktail is absorbing into our blood plasma after one use, disrupting our master hormone network, destroying marine life, risking industrial benzene contamination, and chemically degrading in the sun, it is completely understandable why there is a massive consumer shift away from these products.
Completely understandable.
Which perfectly leads us into the next phase of this deep dive. If we are walking away from the synthetic chemical experiment of the last 40 years, what is the actual future of protection? Our source spends a lot of time highlighting emerging, natural, and truly holistic alternatives.
And this is where the scientific narrative shifts from a paradigm of synthetic arrogance to biological harmony. If we connect this to the bigger picture, researchers started asking a very basic evolutionary question. What organisms have successfully managed to sit under direct, punishing UV radiation for millions of years without developing cancer?
Plants.
The answer is plants.
The power of plants. I mean, think about it. A tree sits outside, completely immobile, completely unprotected, absorbing direct sunlight from dawn to dusk every single day. And it doesn't just survive, it thrives. How do they manage the radiation? The source points to specific botanical compounds, flavonoids and polyphenols.
These are naturally occurring secondary metabolites found abundantly in almost all plant life. And they serve a fascinating dual action that makes them incredibly promising for human skincare application.
Okay, what's the first action?
First, their molecular structure actually gives them the physical capacity to absorb broad-spectrum UV rays. They can absorb both the deep-penetrating UVA and the surface-burning UVB. They act as a botanical filter.
But the source argues that the second part of their dual action is where the real magic happens.
Right. The second action is their role as incredibly powerful antioxidants.
Yeah.
We mentioned earlier that when UV radiation hits the skin, it causes oxidative stress.
Yeah.
It creates free radicals, which are highly unstable molecules missing an electron. These free radicals bounce around wildly inside your cells, stealing electrons from your DNA and your cell membranes, causing massive damage.
Oh, wow.
Flavonoids and polyphenols are electron donors. They actively step in and neutralize those free radicals before they can damage the DNA. So they don't just block the light, they actively repair and protect the microenvironment of the cell from the stress caused by the light.
It is dynamic, active protection, not just a passive shield. And I want to be clear, this isn't just fringe wellness blog theory. The source cites a comprehensive review from Nature Reviews Chemistry, which is a highly prestigious, rigorous journal, suggesting that these exact plant-based filters could literally be the foundation of mass-market sunscreen in the next decade.
It's very promising.
You get the UV absorption, you get the active antioxidant repair, and you completely eliminate the risk of toxic endocrine disruption in the bloodstream.
It is a profoundly elegant solution, borrowed directly from nature. But the source doesn't just stop at botany. It pushes into some cutting-edge molecular science with the introduction of molecular hydrogen.
Molecular hydrogen. I have to admit, reading this, I was skeptical. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie or something you use to launch a rocket. I know hydrogen is the H in H2O, but how does a literal gas protect the skin on my face? Are we talking about spraying gas out of a can?
It's a very fair question because the delivery mechanism is unique. It comes back to that core problem of oxidative stress. Molecular hydrogen, two hydrogen atoms bonded together, is an incredibly potent antioxidant.
Okay.
But its superpower is its size. It is the smallest molecule in the universe. Because it is so microscopically small, when it is infused into a skincare matrix like a specialized water solvent or a topical patch, it doesn't just sit on the surface.
Where does it go?
It slips effortlessly through the lipid bilayer of your cell membranes, and it can even enter the mitochondria in the nucleus.
So it goes exactly where the deepest damage is happening.
Precisely. Other larger antioxidants can't reach those intercellular structures. And hydrogen is highly selective. It specifically targets and neutralizes hydroxyl radicals, which are the most toxic, destructive free radicals generated by UV exposure.
Wow.
The transcript references a compelling study published in Oxidative Medicine and Cellular Longevity, demonstrating that topical hydrogen therapy actively helps prevent UV-induced skin damage at the genetic level.
That's incredible.
Furthermore, specialized hydrogen patches are now being utilized in clinical settings to dramatically speed up cellular healing and stimulate collagen production to rebuild the skin's structural integrity after an intense sunburn. It is a total paradigm shift. We are moving from just trying to block the sun to equipping the cells with the exact tools they need to handle the sun.
Which changes everything. But
Yeah.
I also know that if you are listening to this right now, you might be thinking, that's great for the future, but I am going to the beach this weekend and I need a solution today. You know, you can't just buy hydrogen patches at the corner store yet.
Right.
Fortunately, the source offers a highly accessible, shockingly simple DIY approach for immediate protection. Homemade sunscreen.
The recipe highlighted in the material is fascinatingly rudimentary, yet biologically profound, combining beef tallow and non-nano zinc oxide powder.
Beef tallow. We are talking about rendered animal fat. I can hear people cringing through their headphones. It does not sound like a luxurious spa experience.
Well, it might not have the marketing appeal of a tropical scented spray, But from a dermatological perspective, it is exceptional. Tallow is incredibly rich in fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K.
Right.
More importantly, its fatty acid composition, specifically its ratio of oleic to stearic acid, is almost identical to human sebum, the natural oils your skin produces.
Oh, interesting.
It is highly biomimetic. Your skin recognizes it. When you gently heat and mix tallow with non-nano zinc oxide, meaning the zinc particles are too large to absorb into the blood, you create a dense, highly effective, completely unabsorbable physical barrier.
It is incredibly inexpensive. The ingredient list is entirely transparent. It sits right on the surface of the skin, and it provides legitimate physical UV reflection. There is no oxybenzone. There is no risk of benzene contamination. There is no endocrine disruption. It is just saturated fat and earth minerals. It is beautifully, brutally simple.
It serves as the perfect illustration of shifting away from complex, hyper-engineered, potentially toxic chemical solutions and returning to simpler, biologically compatible, historically grounded solutions.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps the most important conceptual shift of this entire deep dive. We've spent an hour talking about the threat of cancer, the paradox of the 1980s, the hidden dangers of the chemicals, and the elegance of natural alternatives.
Yeah.
But the source makes a powerful underlying argument that we need to fundamentally change our psychological relationship with the sun itself.
For 4 decades, the public health messaging has been rooted entirely in fear and avoidance. The narrative is that the sun is an enemy, a giant ball of radiation in the sky that must be avoided at all costs, and you must shield yourself completely from the moment you step outside.
Right.
Our source argues passionately that this is a biological mistake. The sun shouldn't be feared, it must be managed. Sunlight is an absolute biological requirement for human optimization.
And to manage it safely and effectively, the expert in our source, Gary Brecka, introduces a highly actionable daily habit for you to implement right now. It requires no money and no products. It's called the First Light Protocol.
The First Light Protocol is entirely about timing your exposure to harness the immense biological benefits of the sun while completely avoiding the UV risks.
Okay, how does it work?
The protocol dictates that you get outside, ideally without sunglasses or without thick clothing blocking your skin, for the first 40 to 45 minutes of the day, right as the sun is coming over the horizon.
And the physics behind this specific 45-minute sunrise window is the key. During this early morning period, because of the sharp angle of the sun in relation to the Earth's atmosphere, the atmosphere filters out the harmful radiation.
Exactly.
There are mathematically 0 UVA or UVB rays reaching the surface of the Earth. 0. You are at absolutely no risk of an erythema burn and no risk of deep DNA aging damage.
You are completely safe from radiation. Instead, what the sun is emitting during that sunrise window is a high concentration of very specific, beautiful blue light photons.
Oh.
When you step outside and engage in horizon gazing, which simply means looking out toward the general direction of the light without staring directly into the blazing sun, that specific wavelength of blue light hits a unique set of receptors in the back of your eyes called melanopsin receptors.
And hitting those receptors acts like flipping a master switch in the brain. It triggers a massive systemic biological cascade.
Precisely. It acts as the primary environmental signal to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master clock in your brain.
Okay.
It tells your body that the day has begun. This optimizes your morning cortisol awakening response, giving you natural energy and alertness without needing a pot of coffee.
That's amazing.
And incredibly, getting that specific light in your eyes in the morning simultaneously starts the biological timer for your pineal gland to release melatonin exactly 12 to 14 hours later.
So getting unprotected, safe sunlight in the morning is actually the secret to deeply improved restorative sleep that night. It's all connected.
It really is.
The transcript even mentions stacking this first light exposure with 5 minutes of morning breath work to further regulate your autonomic nervous system. You are taking the very thing we were told to hide from, and you are using it as a precision tool for systemic healing.
It is the absolute epitome of managing exposure rather than practicing complete avoidance. But we have to be absolutely clear here. The source is not advocating for abandoning protection when the sun is high and the radiation is real.
Right, of course.
It advocates for layered, holistic defense. Sunscreen, specifically the safe physical mineral sunscreens we just detailed, is just one single tool in a multi-tiered strategy.
Right. You don't just rely on the cream. You build a defense system. You utilize protective clothing, which never wears off. You wear wide-brimmed hats to protect the tops of your ears and the back of your neck, which, as we learned, are prime real estate for basal cell carcinoma. If you are out fishing or hiking all day, you wear long sleeves with a UPF rating woven into the fabric. You invest in high-quality UV-rated sunglasses to protect your corneas and the incredibly thin, delicate skin around your eyes from the ager rays.
And most importantly, you actively manage your environment using basic common sense. You actively seek shade during those peak UVB hours of 10:00 a.m. to 4:00 p.m.
Yeah.
You plan your intense outdoor workouts, your gardening or your beach walks for the early morning or the late afternoon when the angle of the sun works in your favor. You use architectural barriers, trees, clothing, and safe minerals rather than relying on a synthetic chemical spray to magically grant you invincibility at high noon.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring all these complex threads back together. Skin cancer is a massive looming threat, a 1 in 5 reality for Americans, but it is also a highly, highly preventable one if you understand the mechanics.
Surviving and thriving under the sun requires a fundamental transition from passive reliance on slick marketing campaigns to active, informed management of your personal biology.
You are now fully empowered with the knowledge to make different choices. The next time you are at the drugstore, you can confidently walk right past the aerosol chemical sprays, knowing the hidden risks of benzene contamination and systemic endocrine disruption.
Absolutely.
You can embrace the physical blockers, the zinc and titanium that act like actual mirrors. You can keep an eye out for the future of skincare with plant-based polyphenols and molecular hydrogen therapies. You can implement simple, routine self-exams in the shower to catch the fast-moving melanoma threats before they spread. And you can utilize the profound, free healing power of the First Light protocol to optimize your sleep and your circadian rhythms.
It truly is a complete recalibration of your relationship with the outdoors. You don't have to hide in the dark, but you can't be reckless either.
Right.
But as we synthesize all this material and wrap up this deep dive, there's a final lingering thought that emerged from the research that I think you really need to ponder as you go about your week. We have spent the better part of 4 decades, ever since the 1980s boom, trying to chemically engineer our way out of sun damage. We created wildly complex synthetic cocktails in laboratories to try and outsmart billions of years of solar radiation,
Yeah.
only to slowly, painfully discover that the chemicals themselves might be harming our hormone systems and poisoning our vital ocean ecosystems.
That's tragic, really.
Meanwhile, nature, through plant polyphenols that have survived, completely exposed to the sun for millennia, through the simple physical minerals pulled straight from the earth, and through the specific, deeply healing timing of the morning light, had already provided the complete blueprints for our protection.
It is incredibly humbling when you look at it that way.
It really is. And it makes you wonder if the highly engineered chemical seatbelt turned out to be contributing to the severity of the crash. In what other areas of our daily health, our diets, our medicines, have we completely ignored natural environmental cues and historical evolutionary biology in favor of a quick, highly profitable artificial fix?
That is the exact question to take with you today. Where else are we blindly trusting the modern engineering over the brilliance of the natural design? We want to warmly thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Our mission is always to help you cut through the marketing noise, bypass the panic, and get to the actual mechanical truth of your health. Stay curious, stay vigilant with those monthly self-exams, protect your biology, and step out into the sun tomorrow morning with a completely new understanding.